Hello, welcome to the Trauma-Informed SLP. I'm Kim Neely. What's up?
Hey, we're promoting safety and empowerment over here! My apologies to all New Yorkers and fans of Midnight Cowboy.
On this channel, I advocate for neurodivergency inclusion and affirming practices and societal equity and such, and also talk about trauma-informed things, which I'm not a mental health professional, but I come at it from the side of what communication can do, essentially, especially among people with communication differences, like neurodivergence and stuff. Hey, welcome, if it's your first time here. I am finishing up my commentary of that new Jubilee video that I don't remember the title of, but it's like, can you tell if someone's autistic, basically? Like 3 autistics interviewing 20 people and trying to pick who is autistic and who is not. Essentially is what they're going for there. I did part of it already. If you'd like to check it out, there's a part 1. But it took me a while to get through the first 10 minutes because I was including a lot of thoughts from my perspective as a trained speech language pathologist, but also my perspective as a late diagnosed neurodivergent myself, and a lot of other things that I've researched in terms of neurodivergent culture and things I've noticed in terms of just communication differences between unmasked neurodivergents and neurotypicals. So I'm going to keep it going today. We're going to finish it up, hopefully. I've said a lot of my piece and we'll finish it up. I'll try to make fewer facial expressions while watching. I noticed I am very animated when I'm watching people talk, which is kind of a me thing, to be pretty animated. I feel like there was something else I was going to say. What was it? Oh, that's right. Also, I feel remiss in saying none of this is intended to be diagnostic. I'm not talking about anything that anyone should take as a diagnostic or as a sign that they themselves are autistic or neurodivergent. If you are watching this and you start having a curiosity and an inkling you may be neurodivergent of some kind, I do strongly encourage you to find trained professionals in your area who are neurodivergent affirming, but also really know how to assess, especially adults and such, and seek out professional guidance on that, because neurodivergent things overlap with a lot of other things in the DSM-5 and in other diagnostic criteria as well. There can be lots of overlaps. And so it's really hard to parse that out if you're just watching social media and looking for like listicles. That's not always the best way. That said, I do know, especially in the United States, seeking professional assessments can be costly and can be prohibitive for some people. So my hope is really just to educate. Just wanted to add that disclaimer though. Please don't take any of this as actual medical advice. It is truly, truly, truly intended for education and increasing awareness in just societal discourse around neurodivergence and differences versus what might actually be leading more to the social model of disability and burnout and all of that stuff, right? Because I think there's room for both things to consider. Their communication differences amongst neurodivergents that aren't necessarily disordered communication, but there are ways that that difference can still lead to disability under the social model of disability, especially when thinking of expectations among employers and things like that, and how easily our communication gets misinterpreted. So that's kind of the angle I'm coming at with this, is hopefully educating and talking a little more about that. That's also why I'm way over here, because I didn't put myself far enough over here when I was editing the first one, so I put myself over here more so that the video can be this a ways, okay? But that's what we're up to. Let's get to it.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Annika.
I'm Austin. Your style, this is something that literally Billie Eilish will wear. It's very big, overly sized, very 2000s.
Honestly, I love her style. He's right that I'm hoping I'm using the right pronouns, by the way. I was thinking about that yesterday, especially as an agender person. I'm like, is Austin a he? I'm not sure. So Austin, if you're ever seeing this and I mispronounced you, I'm so sorry. I don't know. I'm not sure. But anyway, nonetheless, yeah, her look, what it looks like to me is comfortable, which honestly, I dress for sensory needs. I dress for comfort, 100%. So I respect anyone who dresses for comfort. Honestly, slay. I love it.
What was your like grade 9 year?
I actually went to an all-girls Catholic school, so it was like kind of a crazy jump. Had to make all new friends.
Yeah.
But I was friends with the theater kids.
You were friends with the theater kids?
But I didn't do theater.
But you weren't a theater kid?
No.
So you're neurospicy, is what you're trying to say. No, sorry, that's what I'm trying to say. Okay, neurospicy.
I think what Paige meant by neurospicy there is meaning like maybe neurodivergent of some kind, especially being friends with the theater kids, because theater kids are known as kind of the weirdos. And there's a fair amount of overlap with theater and performing arts. At least in my personal experience, this is not necessarily professional, like known. I don't have a stat for this, but anecdotally, in my personal life, I have a master's of music and voice performance. I was kind of performance adjacent for a while there, did opera, did musical theater, that kind of stuff, and definitely was a theater kid growing up. And I do think there is an overrepresentation of certain types of neurodivergence in the performing arts, especially in acting and theater. And in dance too, really. And I think it maybe might be more ADHDers and a little more AUDHDers, but also some autistics as well, for sure. And I think it just depends on where our hyperfixations lie. I think the reason I really was drawn to theater was essentially trying to figure other humans out. Like I know Anthony Hopkins, who got a very late diagnosis of being autistic. He said that it was his interest in human psychology that led him into acting. And I feel like I was drawn to it for a similar reason, for being able to explore being a different person, trying on different masks, basically, and kind of trying to figure out what makes other people tick, because it was just hard for me to fit in. I also like to say, though, I was a theater kid, but I was also weird for the theater kids. So that's fairly weird.
What was a big challenge that you have overcome or you're still ongoing about?
I know
I still love that question. It's such a good question, Austin. Such a good question.
somebody already answered this, but it's also making friends.
I know that feeling.
Yeah.
The making friends is definitely a thing neurodivergents struggle with, especially autistics and ADHDers, but other neurodivergents too, especially if you have like mental health problems that are not like the common ones too. Obviously, anxiety and depression can make it very hard to make friends. Trauma can definitely make it hard, but also like if you suffer from like a personality disorder, or like if you start having hallucinations and you start having like a schizophrenia type of thing developing when you're kind of young adult, which is sort of the onset for that, that would make it very hard to make friends for sure. So
if you could eat one food for the rest of your life, what would it be?
I felt like you were gonna ask me that.
I just went randomly.
I would actually say Venezuelan food. It's called arepas.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Oh my God, I love arepas. Arepas are so good. Oh man, if you've never had them, they're basically like sandwiches, but with like a masa corn kind of cake essentially as the bun. I'm also gluten-free now, which I realized like kind of in my, I guess, early 30s, I realized needed to avoid gluten. So arepas are usually pretty safe for that. But oh my God, if you get an arepas with like pork and like avocado and you get the cheese and like... They are so good. Seriously, if you ever can try it in arepas, give it a try. They're delicious.
Like, I'm feeling like you could be masking. You got me kind of like, are you or you're not? What is your biggest fear?
I think being alone. Like, I like being with one person, but I like to do my own thing. But I just like making sure I'm not by myself somewhere.
Yep, autism.
Okay.
Okay, I love that moment, actually. That was a really good note. And that actually makes me think I would actually suspect autistic possibly as well. Because that is speaking to autistics' love of... When they're little kids, we would call it parallel play, where it's like you're just existing in the room with another person, but you're doing two different things at once. It still is a feeling of bonding and connection to just exist in a room with a human for us. Like, honestly, my spouse and I, we do this all the time. Like, he's over there playing video games and I'm over here watching like my shows or whatever it is I'm hyperfixating at the time, whatever show I have or whatever I'm watching. And I'm over here doing that while he's doing the games. And like, we can interrupt each other sometimes and like kind of interject and like share a little bit of our interest, but then we go back to our separate interests. Like, it's still separated. And it is one thing, especially with kids, with autistic kids, neurodivergent kids in general, but definitely autistic kids. It's one of those areas where as a clinician, I'm taught to notice like, oh, they haven't graduated from parallel play, because we think of it as like more neurotypical kids, or at least the kids that were more typically developing that were studied in all the literature, like back in the day and such. They tend to do parallel play when they're really young, when like earlier on. And then they sort of graduate into like joint attention, and so you're paying attention to the same thing, and you're like both listening to a book, or you're both playing with Barbie or whatever, or G.I. Joe or He-Man, if you're of my generation, the 80s He-Man action figures, sup. Or the OG Transformer ones. Oh my God, that was so cool. We had the one that turned into a tape deck, and that was pretty cool for the 80s to have a toy that became a working tape deck. That was pretty cool. Anyway, so there's usually that thought that you, as kids, they graduate to these other stages. But that is one thing I would say. I think there definitely needs to be more research into it and more observation of autistic kids that are not therapized. That's the real trick. They have to like not be therapized to play in different ways due to adult expectations. But if we could just do more natural observation of some untherapized autistic kids, I suspect we would see that they have different patterns of using parallel play at different times compared to joint attention, compared to these other stages of play. Not that they don't graduate to them. I don't think they have as much of like a linear progression through them, because even as an adult, like I said, like parallel play, the adult version of parallel play for me is still pretty important. When my spouse is out of town, I still miss the presence of that person in the room doing their own thing while I'm also doing a different thing. Like we want to coexist in the same space, even if we're doing different things. Kind of bizarre, I guess, for neurotypicals to think of, but that is something I want to address. Like, I think there definitely is room in the literature for us to research more into that. And I think it's definitely something clinicians underestimate the importance of having a autistic child. If you have them in your clinic room and they don't want to engage with you, just do whatever version of parallel activity you can do. Like you could be sitting there doing, as a clinician, you could be sitting there literally doing your paperwork on the computer, like not having the kid where they can read it because, HIPAA, privacy, all that. But you could literally be doing that and have the kid just like exist in the room playing with you. And that's fine. If that's what they need for a while, if they need that for the first like few sessions or whatever, that's actually a totally fine approach. Because it's not about building rapport at that point. It's about building a relationship and helping that kid to feel safe around you. And most adults never give autistic kids the time to just exist in the space with them. And that's actually a really important thing, I think, for autistics, to feel comfortable.
Hi, how are you?
Quite well. Are you all right?
I'm not too bad, yeah. Do you know that you're wearing the bisexual colors?
I do.
Nice. Awesome.
He is indeed wearing that. I just noticed that the socks were purple and pink. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, bisexual king. Woo, go ahead. Okay. Even if you don't identify as a male, I'm totally fine with calling you a king because I'm agender. I feel like all gender terms will just whatever. They're whatever I want them to be, right? Is that the rule? I feel like that's the rule. Joking. I don't know. It's my rule, though.
What kind of music do you like to listen to?
I do like hard rock, hip-hop, and some metal. I dabble with some pop every once in a while. Mm-hmm. Pretty much also Beyonce and Cardi B.
Oh, very fun.
There was one little word there. He had a little bit of a frontal lisp. That's just the speech therapist in me noticing that. His tongue went through his teeth when he was doing like an S. I feel like it was an initial S, and I forget which word it was, but it was kind of a sound. So his speech sounds a little different from the frontal lisp. That doesn't mean he's autistic. And honestly, I think we need to relax on speech differences anyway, quite frankly, which is a little blasphemous for a speech therapist to say. But if you're an adult and you've gone through all the speech therapy you can and like whatever, like, and it is what it is, like everybody needs to calm down. Okay. Like, it's like like whatever. We just need to calm down about it. It's not that big of a deal in my opinion to have that.
I hypothesize that you may be on the spectrum.
Yes, sir.
I love his answers, the yes, sir. He's very proper, and I think he's doing his best to appear comfortable while also trying to make others comfortable. Seems like that's the vibe I get. I don't know. I might be totally making that up. That might just be projection. But I would say likely autistic, not because of the frontal lisp, though. It's really more of his overall body language is different than I would expect a neurotypical's body language in this scenario. And his extreme politeness, honestly, is probably likely I'm really going to do my best to not upset anybody, which is a very autistic thing to do, especially if you are appearing as a cis man in the society. If that's what you appear like, it makes sense that you would want to really try to not tick people off and not to appear threatening. Probably important, you know?
I don't have any other questions.
And he's not making eye contact. You can see that he's actually looking below her level of her eyes, which some might interpret to be creepy. They might think, oh, he's staring at her chest. I don't know that he's staring at her chest, because as an autistic, if he is autistic, autistics can look like they're staring at something that's not great. And they might be, maybe, but they also could literally, like, he could be looking at literally like the lace on her top and like be fixated on the lace and have nothing to do with the body part. So I just want to share that, by the way. Might look like he's being a little bit of a creep, but that actually just might be an autistic, like he's zoning out a little bit, because if he is autistic, I guarantee this filming day was probably so overstimulating for all the autistics that depending how long it took for him to have his turn, he might have just been like ready to do autistic shutdown, like crawl into his little hyperfixations and relax. That, you know, so.
Hello.
Hi, I'm May.
Hi, May. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Okay. Well, say, May.
I know I keep pausing so much, but that brings to mind another thing that I personally think is a really big part of like autistic ADHD culture in general are puns and rhymes. Like, I know people call them dad jokes, but I swear we should just call them neurodivergent jokes at this point, because like my brain is so tickled when people rhyme things or when there's a funny pun somebody made with a rhyme. Like, I will never not find them funny. And other people are like, oh, you're so cringe. And I'm like, you know what? It tickles my brain in a really fun way. And I just like it. You know, it gives me a fun sensation inside. My brain's like, ooh, those words connected in a fun, different way. And it's like, it's just cool. I don't know. So I argue that like puns and rhyming, can we call that part of neurodivergent culture? I know not all neurodivergents find that hilarious, but like I feel like there's a higher proportion of us that do, you know, and that's kind of what culture is about. You don't have to be a monolith. You don't have to always fit in with every single thing, but like if the majority do, maybe, I don't know, just a thought.
I work with children after school daycare.
Cool.
Yeah.
Have you been doing that for a while?
Yeah, 2 years, but I'm still in school. So
Yeah, 2 years still in school. We're swaying.
Yeah.
We're swaying.
That's how I sway back and forth. I do it all the time when I'm working at a desk or something. I just do this. Right now I'm standing, so I'm not doing this much, but I rock back and forth, side to side. I don't do forward and back. I don't know why, but side to side is my jam.
Was there somebody that gave you some advice that gave you a big change in your perception of life?
I would say I take the advice of my friends very wholeheartedly, but personally for me, I feel like I'm in my own head all the time. So if something's wrong, like sometimes I'll seek help from other people, but at the end of the day, I feel like I kind of just got to figure it out in my own head because I know myself best and I'm kind of just in my head all the time.
Yep.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, Austin has the best questions. His questions are so insightful. And I think my prediction is Austin is actually identifying autistics probably more effectively because of that. He's asking so many great questions. That is such a great question about like who has given you advice that has really changed your perception of things. Obviously, Austin had a lot of therapy. He was diagnosed at 2, so he probably got so much advice from therapists and from different treatment people and all kind of like he's probably had advice in spades, like so many different like perspective taking things and stuff, I'm sure. But also her answer reminded me of me and how much, especially prior to diagnosis, I would obsessively review conversations in my head. I would try to predict conversations. I would practice conversations, like trying to kind of script them. I did that since I don't even know how young I've been, since I've been doing that. And so like getting advice from other people, yes, but I also analyzed things in my own head over and over and over again. And it helped me with my training of being a clinician because I was really reflective on my own like what I did in that session and what I could have done better. I was really good at reflecting on that. But it also was a point where like it was definitely anxiety provoking as well. And so like learning to calm that down has been actually kind of helpful. I still do it, of course, but like not in such an anxious way of being worried about messing up, which has actually been a really big positive thing for my mental health. So, but that really relates to me because I'm a neurodivergent who never got any kind of intervention or services or anything like that. So, I mean, I kind of therapized myself through my graduate studies, I guess. But in terms of communication and stuff, I learned a lot of skills through that. But yeah, that is not, that I think if she is autistic, I'm going to put money down. My bet would be she hasn't really gotten a lot of intervention, right? She might be late diagnosed. She might not have been noticed, or maybe she didn't really need any like an IEP or anything in school, but she probably didn't get a lot of intervention. And so she probably, had to figure things out on her own, basically. So using her friends is one thing, but especially if you feel like you don't have good friends or it's hard for you to find good friends that will give you good advice, yeah, you just end up analyzing a lot in your own head. So I relate to that, and I can see why Austin said like, yeah, probably autistic, because I think that is a common thing. I think it's the CAT-Q. Is that the test for like how much you mask? And camouflage is one of those things. And part of camouflaging is like, and mirroring people. And part of it is essentially rehearsing in your own head and thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking about things and analyzing stuff like that. That's actually one of, that's a category of questions. I think it's the CAT-Q. I'll put a link below. I can't quite recall, but yeah.
By the way, I have a shirt that's very similar to that. It's that, but it's light blue stripes.
Green's the way to go.
And I like how there's a slight green on your shoes too. I like to very severely match my outfits as well. Amazing, man. Not sure why. But just for the heck of it, I'm gonna say I hypothesize that you may not be on the spectrum.
I'm getting kind of neurotypical vibes from him too, which is interesting because you think computer science, typical geek, gotta be autistic, right? And it's like, not necessarily. But it is interesting because my spouse is engineering and did computer science as part of his undergrad engineering degree. And so when I was around the like true computer programmers, like sometimes he'd be doing like homework or group projects and I would just like be hanging out waiting on him, you know, because like dating life, that's how that goes, you know. And I noticed a lot of their interactions were very straightforward, very to the point, also could be info dumpy. Like it was almost like an autistic culture within the degree that is not reflective of everyone being autistic, but it was almost like an expected way of interacting with each other. And from what my husband has experienced in industry now that he works, and the programmers that he knows, it's like, it does seem to me like computer science and especially programming has this like essentially an autistic culture, but it doesn't mean everybody in it is actually autistic. It's just the way that they expect to interact with each other. Like one of the things is computer scientists are really good at being really open about how much they get paid. And so they actually get paid pretty well, because if they find that they're not getting as much as their peer, they will advocate for more pay, which is definitely like socially, yes, you should do it. Yes, we all need to do that more in the United States, but they did it way before people were like, we should all start doing this. Like it was just part of that like honesty, like blunt honesty aspect that I think is kind of an autistic thing, really. So I think it's interesting because I think it's one of those fields where probably there are a fair number of autistics who go into it. And I think they pulled the entire industry culture toward their way of communicating. And it doesn't mean that everyone in it is autistic. It just means that like that is how people in that industry communicate, which is interesting, right? No research on that, just what I think.
Was there a time in your life that you would never forget and that helped you to this very day?
I guess when I met my fiance.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. He really helped me through a tough time.
That was just so sweet. I loved how Austin was like, oh, congratulations. Like the genuine excitement. That was really nice. That's cute. I'm not trying to infantilize, but it is one of the things I love about neurodivergence in general. And this is true for the high schoolers I worked with, but it's also true for unmasked adults. Like, they're so good at showing like their genuine emotion for it. Like there's an emotional vulnerability to unmasking. And I think it's just really, I don't know if it's just really affirming or what, but I love the emotional honesty that is shown. So that was just lovely.
To hear them.
To hear them. Well, I think that you dress very autistic in a good way, because autistic people dress awesome. And I also, when you're telling or recalling things, you're looking up and to the left, and that's also something that I see I do, and a lot of my autistic friends do when we're recalling things, especially that we like, because that's like the creative way, or I don't know, whatever brain thinks.
Side note, the right left brain stuff, way disproven. Long ago, disproven. Not actually how the brain works, but you know, that's okay. We'll let it, it's still, the information is still out there very prevalently among just general discourse. But yeah, right, left brain, creative, analytical stuff, not true. It's more like an overgeneralization of the fact that certain areas of your brain are localized, like certain structures in your brain are really good at certain types of tasks. It's not like one is more dominant than the other. And we all have different ways of being wired in our brains, which is literally what neurodivergence actually means, like neurodivergents, CE at the end. That means everybody's brain is wired differently, which is 100% a true statement.
When you stub your toe, how many seconds does it take for you to notice you stub your toe?
Immediate.
I think it's a sensory thing, whether she's hyposensitive for not noticing in terms of the interospection of our body, or hypersensitive as in like when I stub my toe, I'm really disinhibited about like the pain, sudden pain and stuff like that. Acute pain is like, you know, like it really, because I think it's kind of dysregulating, you know. But for interoception, if it comes to like hyposensitive or at least unaware of things, better question would be probably like getting it more of like a hyper focus. Can you recognize when you need to go to the bathroom? Like how long have you sat past the point where you really should have gone to the bathroom? Like how often does that happen to you where you realize you really should have gone like long ago? Or have you gone an entire day without drinking or eating anything because you were so focused on something? Like that's probably a better way to look into like what happens to us when we get into hyperfocus and stuff. Now, ADHDers also get that too. So it might not be a very distinguishing characteristics for autistics versus ADHDers, but definitely something that neurotypicals tend to not struggle with as much. And I definitely struggle with it for sure.
I hypothesize, once again, I don't know why, that you may be on the spectrum.
I was actually just thinking, I wonder if part of what's making it so hard too, in terms of distinguishing, is that like, if I were doing this sort of interview process with 20 people in a line and I felt respected and safe with all 20, I might be more inclined to assume they're more neurodivergent, because neurodivergent people who are aware of their neurodivergency are usually the people I'm the most comfortable to be around, and we understand each other the most. It would be weird for me to be in a room with 20 neurotypicals and feel completely comfortable to be myself. But this is a very contrived environment. So I'm wondering if it's kind of creating this bias effect of like, everybody's treating me with respect and everybody's listening and answering my questions. And so I feel safe. Therefore, people are neurodivergent, I guess, here. But obviously he knows he must be wrong about that. But it's like, I almost wonder if that's kind of what's going on, because that would probably happen to me too, where it's like, oh, I feel like accepted by people and like respected here. And it's like, it's a weird feeling. And especially if you're a young adult and you aren't to a point like in careers where you're some sort of authority figure, or you're used to sort of being asked questions as an authority figure of something, you just don't get that when you're younger as a neurodivergent. You don't get people assuming you know what you're talking about. You don't get people like respecting your questions or answering your questions. You honestly usually get more scorn and judgment for asking weird questions, or for, you know, wanting to info dump and assuming you know things. You just think you're so smart and so arrogant, you know? So I kind of wonder if that's the artificiality of this is making it harder for people to distinguish, especially the autistics doing the interview, because they have a position of authority here, because they're interviewing and trying to determine if they're autistic or not, right? But they like, and therefore the people in line, I lost my train of thought for a second there, but therefore the people in line are listening to them more and answering them more. And they're getting that feeling of like, oh, like, yeah, I have enough authority here to be respected, and this feels weird, right? And like, it would be easy to just think, oh, these must be people who accept me, which isn't necessarily true. And it's interesting because that is one of the things that makes it hard, I think, as a neurodivergent growing up, is that like, it's hard to know who are your friends and who aren't, because feeling like someone respected you and was polite to you can almost feel like that person must be okay with being my friend because you're so often not treated that way, right? And honestly, we get kind of gaslit a lot just by societal expectations. We kind of it feels like you grow up with gaslighting of like you didn't think you did anything wrong, but then everybody else thought you did something wrong. So then you're like, I guess I did something wrong, right? And that's a whole thing. So I won't go into it too much more than this, but that's the whole ableism of it all, and the internalized ableism and like the whole societal adversity thing and the microaggressions and all that. But it can be really hard to distinguish. And I think especially for younger neurodivergents, earlier stage in life, like it would be a lot harder to try to parse it out. And honestly, without my diagnosis and without unpacking my own internalized ableism, like I don't think I still would be really bad at telling the difference. And I still really struggle with trusting people and letting them in and allowing them to be a friend that really knows my strengths and weaknesses and all of that. I still really struggle with that as a much older adult because being vulnerable with people meant having my heart broken so often and losing the friendships that I'm still very protective of who I actually consider to be close. So yeah. Anyway, there you go. I guess what is that? Avoidant attachment? Whatever. I don't know. Whatever. The unhealthy attachment that comes from trauma. I still have that a bit, especially when meeting new friends. I have like a trial period in my mind where it's like, okay, I'll give them a try for like a couple years. We'll see how it goes. And it's like a couple years. Like, I don't think other neurotypicals probably really think of it that way, but I'm like, okay, I'll be around them for a bit, but not going to trust you for a while.
Hello.
I'm Vaughn.
I'm Austin. Was there a person that inspired you to be yourself without feeling like you're playing somebody else?
Ironically, Batman.
You know what? Batman's pretty relatable. I would say no.
Are you?
I like that though. He's asking about masking. He was literally asking like, have you ever basically masked and did you actually meet one person where you felt like you'd actually unmask? Because that is a revelation to feel like you can unmask around somebody. It is amazing. And the first time feeling safe around someone to unmask is like just such a crazy experience. Oh, my dog was being so cute. But we gotta trim those dew claws. Day's way too long. Yeah.
All right. Hello.
Hi.
What's your name?
Kiana.
Kiana. Nice to meet you. And it genuinely is. I know it doesn't sound genuine, but I'm just exhausted.
Okay.
I was waiting for that. He seems so tired, and I would be so tired too, honestly. I think from being a performer, I can keep the facade of energy up pretty well for a long time. But boy, I'm tired watching the whole video, and I can only imagine how much they edited it out. Like this day, this was an hours long kind of thing, right? Getting to the studio, meeting people, being shown what to do, where to stand, what to say, what portion they're filming, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's a whole production, right? It's going to take a lot. Like, geez, no wonder he's so tired. And all the socialization. Gosh, that's really tiring.
It really is. I love meeting all these people.
And it's true. We can love and super enjoy socialization and meeting people, but at the same time be very tired from doing it. And I'm just thinking like, if I get put in a new environment that's high stimulation, like bright lights, probably lots of ambient noises that I'm not familiar with, and then also expected to socialize, I'm going to get so tired so fast. And it's one thing I've noticed about myself too on vacations. I get really tired on vacations, especially if it's like a new city or something, because I've never, like, there's so much stimuli. It's so overstimulating. Like, I have to build in breaks in my day. Otherwise, it's just, it goes by in a blur. And I'm like on the verge of a meltdown by the end of the day, you know? But I'll definitely start to shut down a bit. Like, I can't take in more sensory information. Like, I need everyone to stop talking to me, and I just need to sit for a bit. And it's actually helpful. It makes me enjoy my vacations a lot more, knowing that I can do that.
I think I'm gonna send you this way.
Okay. This way? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. Right? Oh, okay, this way.
Oh no, she's supposed to go that way.
I think that might have been a moment of like, what was the instructions? Either a zone out attention moment or like not following the instructions, which doesn't have to be an autistic thing. That could be a very ADHD thing as well, where it's like, oh, I was supposed to catch that. Oops, I was supposed to be paying attention and I wasn't for just a brief second. And what did you just say?
Have you seen Metallica?
That's where I got this shirt.
Oh, at a concert?
I was at Aftershock.
Oh my goodness, that sounds like my worst nightmare. Yeah. Just
Sensory-wise, yes, it does. It does sound like my worst nightmare as well. Agreed. But doesn't have to be, there can be plenty of autistics who like it, but yeah.
because of of sensory wise.
Yeah, you gotta drink while you're there. It loosens me up. It makes me feel normal.
It makes you feel normal.
That can be an autistic thing, like using alcohol. I think Yosemite Sam actually has a good video on that, where she talks about how she used to use alcohol as a way to mask and a way to like help her manage any sensory sensitivities when she was socializing. So that actually can be a sign of that. It also can definitely be a sign of other mental health things that might be going on. If you're using some sort of substance to like fit in or feel normal or quiet certain thoughts you're having, it might be a good sign to maybe see a professional if you feel like you're doing it too much or if it has a negative impact on your life. I'm not saying that's the case in with her, like going to a concert and drinking, like, okay, not a big deal. But yeah, I think that that can be a sign. That can be a sign of autism or ADHD or really just neurodivergency in general. But it doesn't have to solely be autistic. But I do think, yeah, Yosemite Sam's video. That's the person to check out. Maybe I'll try to leave a link below for Yosemite Sam's video on her relationship with like substances and alcohol and stuff, because she did a great one. It was a while ago though. I think it's a few years ago now.
There's Sublime, and I'm Austin, by the way.
I'm Ariana.
Yes, I like your necklace. It kind of reminds me of like a rave kind of necklace. So do you do raves?
No, I don't.
Okay.
What do you do for work?
I'm a tarot reader.
What?
Tarot reader.
No way. Okay. Like in real life, online, what's your
Both.
Cool.
What is your deepest passion?
Spiritual practicing, learning how to better myself mentally, physically, tarot, divination type practices, spell work.
Yeah, that's not my ball game a whole lot. I was gonna swipe you left and say you're not on the spectrum because of the fact that the people I know, I don't really seem to get the same first impressions as you. However, I understand that masking is a thing, and I understand that you were saying you wanted to better yourself. I'm just gonna say,
and that also autistics aren't monoliths, right? Like there can definitely be an autistic who's very into the same thing she's into. She might not be as analytical. He might be around more analytical people or people who like have more like logical, whatever, discussions about science or something. He might be more science focused possibly in his social life or whatever. But like autistics aren't monoliths. So interests don't always mean someone is or is not autistic.
How kinky are you on a scale of 1 to 10?
I guess like an 8.
Yeah, good. No, cool. Yeah, cool. Good. I'm excited.
High kinky scale. Yeah, which I mean, the thing about the kink, once again, it's more of a subculture, and there is a lot of overlap with autistics and other neurodivergents as well, but not always one-to-one, right? Like there's also an overlap with asexuals and people who are just not into any, like they don't really have kinks, you know, like that can be a thing too. So it's part of that like spectrum thing, right? Of not being a monolith.
As someone who's like, I am a little bit kinky actually, because from what I've seen, that's a little bit of an autism thing. Actually, a lot of autistic people are kinky. So
some are, some aren't though. You know, some of us are asexual. No.
Correct at 76.47%. We have Austin.
Austin, man. Dude,
Wow.
If there is any means as to not sell yourself short, this is
That
it.
is so cool. Wait, how many did I get right?
That's 13 out of 17. That means you only got 4 wrong, man.
Wow.
That's really
That's
good.
wild.
a few years ago,
So true. And you know what? I really think part of that was because Austin went for those more vulnerable questions about like difficulties people have had and, you know, advice they've been given and if they've asked anybody and it's really changed their perception of something. Like he really was diving into those common experiences that I think a lot of autistics have, especially a lot of non-apparent autistics have, of, you know, feeling a little socially isolated, difficulty with friends, difficulty with, you know, figuring out who you should be, and masking versus being yourself. And like, I think his questions got more into those commonalities. I'm not too surprised that Austin, or Aiden, right? Aiden is the other guy. I think that was the other guy. I think I got that right. Anyway, I don't know, man, me and names. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if I got them wrong. So, but yeah, I think Austin's questions were just a little more introspective in that sense. And I think that allowed him to select a little better. And it really seems to me like Austin has a lot of self-awareness and a lot of awareness of autistic experiences in general. And like, he seems very knowledgeable about it. And I think that allowed him to kind of make those connections and go a little deeper and kind of figure things out with people a little bit more. And it's interesting because I think out of the three of them, Austin, I think, is the most apparent, or at least he's the most apparent, like not a neurotypical, right? Like he's more apparently not a neurotypical. He's still a non-apparent in the sense that like, if he was just hanging out in a grocery store buying something, I wouldn't immediately clock as like neurodivergent, but his mannerisms and stuff still are a little different. And I think it's interesting because when you talk about apparent versus non-apparent neurodivergence, when I talk about it anyway, and when I talk about the different societal stigma, a lot of times apparent neurodivergence and apparent autistics are the ones who are presumed to be not as introspective, not as self-aware, not as cognitively there, essentially, especially for non-speakers, which is a horrible stigma that is completely untrue. Speaking status has nothing to do with what's going on in your brain and how smart you are. It has nothing to do with that. So I just have to keep saying that. Non-speaking does not mean non-thinking. That is so important for everyone to internalize, but so hard to break through that stigma. But nonetheless, it's interesting because I think if certain people had to make a judgment of like which one of these autistics are higher support needs, you know, you might think maybe Austin. First off, I don't even know. I would have to know these people's actual lives and I would have to see like their medical charts and stuff. But Austin definitely asked questions that showed a lot of introspection and self-awareness, and a lot of questions that showed his ability to find common experiences and share commonalities with people similar to himself. And I think that made a difference in his ability to select. But for anyone out there watching, if you watch Austin's mannerisms and hear the way he talks and you think, oh gosh, he's so like obviously autistic. I mean, if that's what you're thinking, I just encourage you to check yourself if you made an assumption about his intelligence because of that. That's all I want to say. Just check yourself on that because you might want to have a think. You might want to rethink your assumptions of intelligence compared to how people present themselves or how they come off initially.
When I first said I was autistic, like out loud, I was like just met with hate, I felt like. And I think it's wild that there were like at least like 15 people that came in here that are like, I am autistic and I know that and I feel that and I'm saying it right now and I'm putting that in a video and I want to be like that. Like I think that's so cool that we're here and that all these autistic people got to be here.
We're on a better path. We're on a better path, and at the end of the day, it's all about acceptance and loving people for who they are, even if it's, you know, something that you might not be able to see right away.
And that is so true too. She was getting at essentially the social stigma. And I get that from some of my clients, especially high schoolers. There were definitely some high schoolers I knew who felt such a deep sense of like shame for being autistics and didn't ever want to talk about it, didn't ever want to mention it. Like it just really upset them that they had that label. And I think that is really reflective of the amount of stigma people experience in society still, and the ableism that you face, and the traumatizing effects, honestly, of all the ableism and the bullying and the teasing and constantly just feeling like you're wrong all the time, you know? So with that said, guess this is my plug. My next series, I'm finishing up my burnout series. I still need to film the one on neurodivergent burnout, which I'll get to. I actually have to refilm it. I filmed it once and I think my microphone wasn't on or something because the sound quality is like super echoey and awful. I think I might have recorded it without the mic on. So we're going to change that up. I'll re-record that and edit it. And then the other thing is the next series I want to do is one on internalized depression, which there's a great book that I'm going to use as my primary resource that goes through different types, different flavors with like between BIPOC compared to queer and stuff like that. But then also bringing in neurodivergent differences when it comes to the non-apparent versus apparent. Because I think there's a lot of parallels to be made between, like, say, the type of oppression you experience as a BIPOC person, having more apparent characteristics that puts you part of a marginalized group versus more non-apparent characteristics, like certain queer people who can mask or hide or stay in the closet essentially of their queerness. That's a different type compared to not. And I make a lot of parallels with like the way I think of non-apparent neurodivergence. They align more with like kind of that queer experience of people that might not assume this at first. So I could hide it. If it's safer for me to do that, I could do that. Right. But there are a lot of mental health costs to that. And so that is the next series I'm going to get into. But also, if you enjoyed this type of response video, I'm so excited to have finally figured out the tech of how to do it. Yas. And if you have any other videos you want my perspective on, let me know, even if they're older videos. I would love more material like this. I tend to get so stuck in my own little bubble and world that I don't know what's out there in terms of what to be responded, what to respond to. So if you have another video out there and you want my perspective on it, and when it comes to whether it's neurodivergence or whether it's speech stuff or whatever, or trauma related stuff, that's fine too. Drop a link in the comments below, or leave me a comment, drop a link, let me know what you want me to respond to. I would love to do that. I would love to do more of this. And also I know the algorithm kind of likes it too. So I guess that will help grow the channel a bit too. So it's a little bit of clout chasing, I guess, but whatever. I'm really bad at feeding into algorithms. So I guess going with the easy, obvious ways is one way to do it. Or anyway, yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know how you liked it. Long response video here. I can try to truncate it a little bit. And if you want to help me get a professional editor, because I edit it myself right now. So if you want to help me get a professional editor, someone who maybe can cut out more of my filler and all that sort of stuff, let me know. And you can also donate to my Ko-Fi as well, or even on my website as well. I have a little support page there too, to help me with the funds to possibly get a more regular editor to help cut out these longer ones. It also helps me to edit faster. Like, I'm sure there's still some refining edits I would need to make, but it could be a lot faster if somebody else could do a lot of the big like hacking of like moments and aligning video with audio and that kind of stuff. That could be nice to have someone else just do that sort of thing. And then I could do the refining and then post it, could be nice. But anyway, I hope you guys have a great week or two, or however long it'll be before I post again. Hopefully not too long. And I will not see you next time because I can't see you. So that script feels weird and disingenuous, but I'll see your comments and you'll see me next time. And in the meantime, I want everyone out there to embrace your own weirdness and use your weirdness for good, right? Yeah, keep it weird for good. Keep it weird as a way of connecting with other people on that human, we're all a little weird kind of level. You know what I'm saying? See you guys later. Bye. That was a little embarrassing. I didn't actually hit the microphone. I nearly knocked it off the table with my boob. That was my boob doing that. It's an issue. I don't know if there's any Crazy Ex-Girlfriend fans out there, but there's that heavy boob song from Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. That was one of those. That's one of them heavy boob moments. If I swung it in your face, you'd be like, oh my God, that hurt.